Testing. Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial IO. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, I'm joined by Herman Velasco, creator of Elixir Streams and PhoenixTest. Welcome, Herman. It's exciting to have you here. You want to just go ahead and give a little brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm always happy to jump on podcasts and chat. Brief intro on myself. I'm a software developer, consultant, so I work with a bunch of companies, usually one at a time, on Elixir projects. And I love to share what I learned, so I do a lot of little things here and there. Elixir Streams is one thing I've been doing for about a couple of years now, I think. Short videos usually go on YouTube, Twitter, X, I guess, Blue Sky, all the things. Send it to emails. And there's a website, elixirstreams.com. And yeah, do open source when I can. That's always been near and dear to my heart, I think. And so I finally have a package of my own. I can't remember, maybe it's been a year and a half or something. It's called PhoenixTest. I'm sure we can talk about it. But yeah, you'll see me around the community. I try to be visible.
Yeah, I enjoy all your Elixir stream content. Like, I feel like you do a really good job of just like, short videos of just like awesome tips and tricks, or like you learn a lot from your like minute and a half videos, and I enjoy that.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, it's what they say, right? It takes a surprising amount of work to do something short. It's
Oh,
like,
I know. Dude,
yeah,
editing is the worst part. That's why I started doing these live, because then I don't have to edit.
it's a hack. I know, man. That's such a brilliant idea. I know the editing always takes a long time. Uh, and
Yeah.
so, and this is interesting to me because I've never done a podcast live. How do you did you always start live, or did you change to live?
So the Elixir Mentor podcast, I started doing live from the start. And the only reason that I learned that I wanted to do that was because I've kind of like I had an old podcast that kind of
Mm.
dripped away, but it was called Big App Energy, and we pre-recorded
Nice.
it, and it was all about like bootstrap startups, and like just kind of
Oh,
knowledge base for non-technical entrepreneurs that have to hire technical people.
okay.
It
Oh,
was
wow.
kind of like what you need to know when you work with developers kind of podcast, because you always hear the horror stories of people getting screwed over and dropping
Yeah.
50 grand and having no product to prove it. And so that's kind of like so Big App Energy was a podcast to like a consultancy that I ran. And
Okay.
that was kind of the point behind it, to educate hopefully our future customers, right?
Interesting. Got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is cool.
And I got
I
so
love
burned
that.
out of editing a damn hour and a half video. I
Oh,
was
you always
like,
did video.
I'm gonna start doing this live stream. And then I figured it out. And actually, we were talking right before we started. Michael from Paraxial, he was my first guest and talked me into doing a podcast. And so yeah, that's kind of how it
Interesting.
kicked off. Yeah.
Wait, he talked you into doing a podcast? How did he talk you into it if he was already a
Well,
guest? Or you just
well,
doing a
he
one-off?
talked me into starting the Elixir Mentor podcast.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So he reached out to me because he found my YouTube channel. I was already doing like educational content for Elixir,
Gotcha.
but I
Okay.
didn't do the podcast.
Okay, 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 okay. Right, because
And then
you have like courses and stuff on Elixir Mentor and your
yeah.
YouTube, right? Yeah, I saw that. Okay.
Yeah, and he reached out. He was like, "Hey, do you ever do like sponsored videos? Would you do one for Paraxial?" And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Like,
Interesting.
never have been offered this." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And then I ended up doing that video, and he's like, I think I might have I was like, I'm considering doing a podcast or some sort of live stream something. And he was like, well, you should do it, and I'll be your first guest. And then, so that's kind of how it started.
Nice. And invited himself. Nicely done, Michael. Nice.
Yeah.
That's like how you
No,
do that.
Michael's a cool dude.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, but yeah, before we like dive into your projects, I always am curious to know where, like, what got Elixir on your radar, and like kind of what was your
Mm.
history that led up to Elixir, and then, consultancy, and then like all the projects that you started doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, I always have a hard time pinpointing when I started looking into Elixir, and I can't remember what brought me into it. I mean, I was in the Rails community. I was doing Rails for a number of years before jumping into Elixir. So I knew Jose from Platform Tech. Like I knew some of the Platform Tech people, I think. Um, I knew of them, I suppose, because they had a couple of open source libraries, and um, but I think ultimately it was Dave Thomas, maybe, that got me into Elixir, that I heard, whether it was a talk from him or this was before this book, I think. So anyway, it's been a number of years, 7 years or something like that
Mm.
ago. Um, and I just started looking into it. I started really getting excited about it. I love the like I love Erlang's concurrency model and sort of the fault tolerance aspect of it. Like that stuff is super appealing to me. The fact that you can, I like to say, you don't only just program like the instructions, but you can actually code how you want the runtime to work, right? That like that
Mm.
aspect of it is so powerful, and I love that aspect of it. So like when I first got into Elixir, a lot of the things I was really interested in were the supervision trees, and I remember doing a talk. I was living in Boston at the time. It was like my first talk in Elixir or something, and at a meetup, and it was all about supervision trees because I just like love that stuff. That was so cool. Um, but anyway, so I got into Elixir, and well, I was still doing Rails, right? I was sort of learning on the side. And then I joined a consulting company called Thoughtbot back in the day. Um, I also don't know. This must be like a while ago as well. But anyway, they're a big rail shop, but they were doing many other things, and they were doing more Elixir at the time. So I joined, and I started working more on Elixir projects and stuff like that. And I got into open source there too, because they used to maintain Ex Machina and Bamboo, and a couple of other like smaller Elixir libraries. And so that's kind of how I got started with consulting. Like I got my kick out of there, and I really enjoyed it. But then Thoughtbot started going more Rails again, so I ended up just leaving and doing solo. And I've been doing that for 3 years now, I think, 3, 4 years, and it has been great. I'm very thankful that to have been able to have a lot of clients and work on more on Elixir. Um, and again, kind of keeping that DNA of the way I do consulting is very thoughtbot like. So, and one of those things that they have is investment time. So they would dedicate like every Friday to do an open source or other things like that. And that's why I have that DNA of like I gave myself investment time. So I bill my clients 4 days a week or the equivalent across 5 days, that kind of thing. And I save time to just give back, which is why I do Elixir streams or I do open source work and stuff like that. But yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's the consulting DNA and the how I got into Elixir. But it's been a long time, so I don't quite remember exactly what was the first thing that brought me in.
No, that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
And you just dove straight in, and I think I speak for everyone that's probably listening. Just we appreciate your content, and
Oh,
one
thank
of
you.
the things that I want to be better at, and I feel like you write about this, but so you have a book called TDD Phoenix, or I should just say it's tddphoenix.com, and it's just a
Yeah.
free online book. Can you buy it? I'm not even sure. Is it just online?
You can't. There's a story behind that, ironically. So it's a little outdated now. Actually, part of me wants to. You'll learn this about me. There's too many things I want to do, which is why so many don't happen. Um, I want to update that book. Maybe make it a course. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't make it a course. I should update it with PhoenixTest. So that book uses Wallaby. It's still great. I mean, it still works, but I haven't looked at it in a while. I don't even remember what version of Phoenix it is. I don't know if it uses like 3.1.3 directory structure or not. And I don't know if I don't know how long you've been in the Elixir community. I don't know if you were working with Phoenix before 1.3 where you had models and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I started dabbling in Elixir in like 2020.
Okay. Oh, recent.
Yeah,
I guess we're
more
in 2020.
recent.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
I'm
five
getting old.
years. So I feel like and I really only did Elixir. I got talked into starting to, well, I used Phoenix, the framework,
Mm.
but not like live view and things. Because I
Yeah.
was mostly just, and I still am mostly just a back end developer.
Okay.
But my YouTube channel, my subscribers bullied me into doing a live view course. And so I learned live view as I made the course. And I think it's good, right? Because I'll like always disclose, like,
Yeah.
guys, I know my tailwind is probably just hacked together. Just go with me. Like,
All of our tailwinds is hacked
yeah.
together. Don't worry. That's
So like
that's the
that's pretty
beauty of it.
much all my videos. But like what I really enjoy was just like learning the life cycle of live view and like how that all works. And like I feel like that part of it, the more technical end of the front end development, is what I really enjoyed. And I think that's what I probably did the best teaching in that course, not front end.
Yeah.
Because I think front end is just like you just have to go through these steps until it looks the way you want it to look, right?
No, I mean, there's something about it. I love the ability to craft an experience for users. Like, I don't do a ton of it because I'm not a designer, but I always love working with designers who can code a little bit, so we can pair a lot on full end-to-end kind of implementation. So I love that aspect. I think there's a lot to that. But yeah, I don't know. I totally get what you're saying. And creating a course as you're learning live view makes total sense. Like
Yeah.
there's some cool stuff. It's a really interesting model. I mean, I think we've kind of taken it for granted now. Maybe not. Maybe it's sort of what is that? The curse of knowledge, where you just assume everybody knows what you just learned. You learn something, you're like, well, I guess everybody knows this, and you forget that you didn't know it 10 minutes ago or whatever. Um, but I think I take it for granted, I guess, the live view model until other people are like trying to, like other communities, I mean, are trying to re-implement those things, right? Or have implemented some poor, I would call them poor man versions of live view because they don't have sort of the statefulness of
Hmm.
Elixir and Erlang. But anyway, it's super cool.
Yeah, it is. And like actually like it is hard to remember your learning curve. So probably learning it as I went was a good thing.
Yeah.
But like cuz that's why I originally like at first my YouTube channel was just going to be back end development and like strictly focus on that. Cuz I just remembered when I first learned Elixir, it was a hard learning curve because I came from,
Oh, really?
yeah, well, once I like grasped, so I had a really hard time learning object oriented programming. My
Okay.
brain did not work, but then it finally clicked, right?
Uh-huh.
And I did that for 8 years, and then I
Right.
started picking up functional programming, and it hurt. But then when it finally clicked, I was like, this is the way our brains and programming is supposed to be done. Like
Yeah.
if I would have started with a functional like immutable language, I think it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. But basically, if you've had any math, right, it feels like functional programming is a lot more natural because that's how
Exactly.
functions work. Like that's what you're
Yeah.
doing with functions, the term function, I think. Um, yeah, yeah, I get that.
It just forces you to break down like every big problem you have to break down into steps, and I feel like functional paradigm forces that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think to a large degree. What was your background? What was the language you were writing?
Oh, I was in so I started as like a civil engineer
Oh, cool.
and then ended up doing more like electrical mechanical engineering work for like 10 years.
Okay.
And I like remote work and I didn't like being stuck to a physical brick and mortar building. So I
Yeah.
taught myself how to program. And
Nice.
then my first like taste of a real job was basically Swift. I was an iOS developer.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was right when Swift came out because I hated Objective C. I don't know.
yeah.
I just
Yeah.
couldn't wrap my head around it. And then Swift came out and it was like the training wheels that I needed to finally
Yeah.
like fully grasp it.
Okay.
And so I did that and I joined a learn to code startup. And I feel like I was like so eager to like learn and improve my skills. I really like grew quickly
Yep.
and like became a backend engineer. Like Node.js, it was our API. So I started like
Okay.
working now on the backend and Swift projects. So back and forth. And so it ended up being like Node.js and Express and just, RESTful API stuff is
Okay.
kind of where I started. And then I had
Interesting.
a buddy in my ear for like 3 years telling me to check out Elixir that he's like, I think you'll really like it. I was like,
Good
dude,
buddy, that one.
yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's awesome, but I don't have time. And it
Yeah.
took me 3 years. And then I finally had my own pet project I wanted to work on. And it was like a marketplace. And I was like, Elixir is probably the perfect fit. Like I knew all the selling points, but I didn't
Sure.
actually know how to apply them. So I just started like learning the syntax and playing
Yeah.
around with it. But I didn't even start using like OTP or gen servers for like a year. And
Right.
then I slowly started growing into it as I needed those tools. And
Makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that was like my little baby step. And sorry for everyone that has heard that story a
Yeah.
bunch of
Sorry, me
times,
asking
but
you questions. I know. Yeah, but it's interesting that it came from Node.js though, because I'm always curious where people are coming from. I know a lot of people, even back at when I was working in consulting with a lot of Rails, who were testing out Phoenix because that was sort of an easy jump.
mm-hmm.
And in fact, and I think the transition from Ruby to Elixir might be easier in some way because of the syntax. The syntax looks very similar, right? Super heavily inspired by that. Um, but because of that, and because Phoenix at the time, this was again before the 1.3 kind of changed. Phoenix looked very Railsy, like app views models. You had all this, so people would it would be easy to learn um, to kind of shallowly. Like, okay, I can do a lot of things, and because Phoenix does so many things well and abstracts so much of the need for you to know about gen servers and all this stuff, like a lot of people were sort of like, oh, this is like a faster Ruby. But eventually they were like, well, we know everything in Rails and we have all this stuff in Rails. Why would we switch over, right? Like there's many reasons you can tell them, but experientially, people were like, a lot of people were sort of like, okay, yeah, I kind of went and learned some Phoenix stuff, but I'm going to switch back to Rails because they didn't get the full benefit. I think, I don't know. That's just my thought. But so anyway, it's interesting to me to see where people are coming from. And sorry that if the listeners have already heard your story, I didn't know.
No, no,
Um,
you're good.
uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think like Elixir was accidental for me, and then I fell in love with the syntax first,
oh,
and
cool.
then
Yeah,
and
it's nice.
and then like Erlang and the Beam VM and OTP and Gen servers, and it just makes your life a lot easier.
It does. It's so cool. I often think about this. I think sometimes people think of Elixir and think, oh, like you can build these really like distributed systems and all this stuff, and like but I don't have that need, right? I'm building my little sample app or whatever. But what I think is kind of cool is that even in those small sample apps, like the way you build things can be different because you have these different tools. These, like, again, you can have supervision. You can do so many neat little things that would kind of create a different sort of I don't know. It's just a different solution to a problem that you could solve in other ways, but it just gives you the different tooling, and I love that. So, but I don't think people realize that. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of companies are like bootstrap startups. They'll start to feel the pressure of choosing like
Mhm.
Node as your back end when you start scaling and you can only throw money at your servers. And that's the only option you really
Yeah.
have. And then your server costs just they skyrocket.
Yeah. I honestly I've never worked with Node in production. I think I did a sample app at some point. But I imagine it's similar in cost maybe to Ruby, to Rails servers and stuff. And I remember that back in the day, right? It's just like get it working and then you just throw money at it,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, I feel like the problem is like it doesn't matter what tech stack you pick at the beginning when you have no users, right?
Right,
You're just
sure.
trying to like get your MVP, you're kind of proving a point. You don't know what you're doing in most cases, and then
Yeah.
you have to rebuild your whole app once you know what you're doing and start to scale.
Sure. Yeah, like yeah, that is true. I do think that so this is gonna go sorry, I'm going in tangents here, but but one of the things I kind of have in my mind is like how to make people adopt more Elixir. How do companies how do we make it so that more companies adopt Elixir? And I think one of the things in my mind, at least, was that the Rails back in the day, this was a long time ago, when Rails first came out, one of the most appealing things was how productive you could be at the beginning.
Hmm.
And so a lot of startups started using it, right? And so you had a lot of startups using Rails, and some of those survived. And then you sort of start having like 10 years down the line, you have a lot of more mature companies using Rails, and you have a lot more jobs and stuff like that. Um, and I think at some point that happened also with Node.js, like a lot of startups using Node.js, and that kind of grew. But I've never seen a lot of startups using Elixir or Phoenix.
Yeah.
As in like I don't know if you had like Y Combinator be like, hey, you should all be using Phoenix, right? Or some I don't know another like Bootstrap.
Well, I feel
What
like
are they
that would
called?
help. Like a conversation that, like on Big App Energy, Ben and I, he was my business partner for the consultancy. We would
Yeah.
always talk about it. It was always the popular choice isn't always the right choice, and I think that's the problem. Like
Hmm.
in when you're in the startup like tech bubble, you hear
Yeah.
all these like just popular choices, and that's what people go with
Exactly.
because they
Yeah.
think, well, if so and so did it, it must be right.
Must be good. And yeah, and it's sort of many times it's what's easy, like the distinction between simple versus easy. It's easy being like close to you or proximate, easy for you to do. Um, so I think a lot of people just do what they already know, and maybe they've already done a startup in a different language, and they just do that one or whatever, right? And so I don't know. It's a hard problem, I think, to
Yeah.
break into it, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about. It's like how do we make it so that more companies are using Elixir, not
And
just
then
now,
once
but like 10 years
Yeah,
from
for
now,
sure.
5 years
No,
from now,
I
right?
agree. Well, I think like you don't have to rebuild your app if you do it with Elixir.
I mean, that's a huge thing. It is, right? It's a big, big thing, but it's what you said. It's sort of like we can pay that price later, right? Like, well, let's just get something going, and then once we actually figure out what our MVP is, and like we could, there's just sort of a thought of like at that point when we have made it, we have a lot of money, you can just kind of like throw money at it and rebuild it in a new stack or whatever. Which again, many people do, but it'd be nicer if you don't have to do that. I guess I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's a big
Um,
undertaking.
Yeah, yeah. It's so hard. Anyway, yeah, that's
And
just
then once you know
a total tangent.
Elixir, that's the solution for everything.
We're might be a little biased, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
You
mean,
can do so much.
I can be talked into why live view wouldn't be used for everything. Like I get that, right?
Sure.
But I
Yeah.
don't like Elixir is like a back end solution.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It is. I do think, as much as I hate to say this, there are scenarios I think where companies, I understand why they choose other technologies or they might kind of augment. I've had clients who do this. I have a client right now who they do Elixir, of course, and but there's some things they work a lot with, like really old stuff that you really need to interface with or interact with, and really it's like there's like a million Java libraries that already do the thing, and so
Yeah.
we are actually there's I don't know if you know there's this thing called J interface in the Erlang. I don't know if it's core something. It's part of Erlang, but it makes a Java app act like as an Erlang node. So anyway, that's a tool we're using. Um, with good success, um, so that we have our Elixir stuff, and then anytime there's a need for something else that maybe Java does better or that already has library, we create a separate node that's a Java node, and we're just sending messages to that Java node. So it's working pretty well. But I understand those scenarios where
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
like we
Well,
can rebuild this thing from scratch with Elixir for a really old technology, or we can just use some stuff that's already there. We're
yeah.
hoping that we don't need to maintain it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, in some stuff, it would be impossible to rewrite completely, right? Because, like,
Sure.
especially if you do it from like the corporate end, where a company's just acquired different tech companies and has pieced things
Oh gosh.
together,
Yeah, yeah.
like sometimes it's not realistic to like tear down every stack and rewrite it.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah, there's limitations and there's so many people anyway. There's like so many people that need to buy in and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's definitely it's always I don't know if you're still in consulting, right? You're still doing consulting?
Actually, no. I'm working as a back end developer for a company called Collex.
Oh, cool.
Collx, and it's a pretty sweet app. So their back end is all Elixir,
Oh, nice.
and it's a trading card app. So you can take pictures of your card. It tells you how much they're worth and like what others have
Oh,
sold for, and then you can sell it on their platform. So it's pretty cool.
oh, nice, nice, nice. When
Yeah.
did you start working there?
I started working there the beginning of January, and
Okay.
it's really cool because I've always been in like the startup mode where you never really have more than a couple thousand users, and now I'm learning all about scalability, performance, and like because we have like
Sure.
300,000 daily active users, so it's like a whole different ball game now.
Nice. Interesting. Yeah, definitely different problems, right? I like
Yeah.
that. Challenges in different
So
ways.
it's cool because I'm learning so many new things that you don't have to think about when you're just a small single node app that you're just trying to acquire a user base, you know?
Yeah. Nothing like those early days where it's like, oh yeah, just launch it again or whatever. It's just like
Yeah. And
rewrite
you
the
don't have to think
migrations.
about the speed of your database queries. It doesn't
Yeah, of
matter,
course.
you know? Like you don't have enough data to make it a problem.
Yeah, right, right, right. Yeah, it's like we'll do instrumentation and figure out the bottlenecks once we actually have stuff, and then we'll optimize, which makes sense. But yeah, I get you. That's cool. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
and what I really love too is like all the other I work with three other Elixir backend devs daily, and I'm the dumb one in the room. So like I feel like I'm just like learning from a fire hose. And I feel like that's like such an awesome position to be in.
yes, that is the best. It's always good to be the the one learning. It's just such an
Yeah.
advantage, right? Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so you started working. Yeah, I was gonna say it's like in terms of like adopting Elixir and all this stuff, it's like in consulting, right? Even though they're technical problems, it's always really people problems.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, like I think adopting Elixir is not a technical challenge. Like I think Elixir has all the stuff we need or companies need or whatever, but it's really a people problem. Like it's hard to
Yeah. Well,
convince
like
all the necessary stakeholders and
when
stuff.
I was doing all the consultancy stuff, it's really easy to convince a client to use Elixir if it's a brand new project.
Mm.
But it's
How did you
not
convince
easy.
them? Tell
Um
me. Were they
Normally they are
non-technical
just trusting your
founders?
uh, okay, a technical founder is a different story, right?
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because then they're going to want what they want. And but I would say
Exactly, yeah.
that was more rare for
Mm.
us to run into, at least. Like we obviously will do whatever tech stack a client wanted,
Hmm.
but every opportunity we had, we would at least push Elixir for the back end.
Right. That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it
And
makes sense. It makes sense.
consultancy is hard, man. I'm like I did it for 4 years, and I feel like
Mhm.
it was like really easy at the beginning, and then it got really hard to find clients this like last year.
It's I've been finding what everybody says is true. It's all networking, right? Like
Yeah.
who you know. It's just, and it's not like not in a bad way. It's just if people don't know about you, how are they going to find us?
Right.
How are they going to know that you know that you can do this work? And also, there's a level of trust, right? Like when you hire someone, you kind of vet them in certain ways. But even when you hire someone, it's a lot of network, right? You hire a new employee. Many times, it's like the an employee you already know and trust is recommending them, and that shared trust, right? So anyway, same thing with consulting, and I get that. It's a lot. It's That's the hard part. The ugly part for me, at least, as well in consulting. It's like the sales cycle or whatever you want to call it. It's
Hmm.
like finding new clients, getting new clients, all that stuff. Yeah, 4 years. It's a long time. I think I'm three. I think so.
Nice.
Check in next year with me. We'll see what I'm doing. I don't know.
It'll go great for you. I just
Oh,
like sales just wasn't my thing. It was hard.
yeah. No, it is. It is. It is. I agree. Um,
I
but
always
anyway,
tell everyone that building the product is the easy part. Getting people to use it's the hard part.
exactly. Yes. That's such a normal thing for us developers, though. It's
Yeah.
like the thing you want to do is build and you forget about distribution and you forget about, again, all that stuff that you're talking about, marketing, sales. Um, I don't know if you have, I don't know. You say you have an interest in you did businesses and stuff, and I love that stuff. But anyway, I was going to say, I don't know if you've had one of these, and I think maybe every developer who's kind of tried to do something on the business side has one of these, but it's like I built an entire project, like a product. The first version of it, I thought was I was happy with it. I was like, this works. And then it sounds so dumb in hindsight, but then I was like, who am I selling this to? Like, I don't even know who, right? And so
Uh, yeah,
it's
I
like,
think that is when you're the builder or the developer or the engineer brain, I think we've all done that. I
yeah,
think I think I did that like twice with two different projects. And I was like, this
it's,
is brilliant.
yeah,
But you're not like doing any small iterations. You're not testing it with anyone. You're just building a product you think people are going to want.
yep, yep, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, and we assume, yeah, I don't know. We assume it's going to be easy to sell. Like you're building the thing, it's beautiful, it's whatever. I don't
Yeah.
know. So,
But
yeah, it's a rite of passage.
what is it? If you build it, they will come. Not
Yeah,
true.
that's
Not true.
yeah. And it's crazy that it's not even even if you have some distribution, like it's not always the best product that wins. It's sad. It's sad, I
No,
think, as
yeah.
builders that it's not true. But yeah, not it's not always the best product that wins. It's like the whatever. It has to be known. It has to be
Dude, so many
used.
products are just shit shows under the hood. And
I know.
like, I have heard way too many horror stories of startups with decent user bases where like teams pushing directly to production, a bug will take production down, and like you have real paying customers, and like that kind of stuff just shouldn't happen.
Yeah, no, I know. I
But they're
know. Or
making money, and you're like, how is this possible?
yeah, exactly. I know. It's been a while since this happened to me, but yes, it's like sometimes you join a client and it's like they're making so much money, and I'm looking at this and it's like so so bad, but I don't know. Um, but it goes on to show, right? Like it's true. It's building is a really small part of making a product or a company successful. So it's good to remember
Now,
for sure.
building well is a different story, but you'll run into those problems when you need to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is an important component of a longer term, like making sure a product can sustain, right? Because you will run into issues if you don't build well. But um, yeah, some people just throw money at it. I guess
Yeah.
it's fine. Yeah,
All right. So, what I am most interested in learning from you today is you're just a big advocate of test-driven development.
yeah, yeah,
Do you do you actually like stick to test-driven development in all cases, or like what is your balance of like actually doing TDD?
yeah, yeah. Happy to talk about it. And sorry, I think I took us on a complete diversion because I just realized we were talking about the TDD book.
Oh,
Um,
you're fine. I think
yeah,
it just,
but
it makes better conversation.
yeah,
I
yeah. But anyway,
actually,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
now another tangent, but
Yeah.
what I've done, I used to like write a description for my podcasts before we even just talked, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it would be like what I thought the conversation was going to be about was the description. Now I take the captions that YouTube generates and I have it create a description based off exactly what we talk about
Oh, nice. I
and
like
make the
that.
chapters so it's like
Oh, I
automatic
like
and
that.
people know everything in the conversation then.
Are you, um, this makes sense because you're doing this live, which is cool. So if you do live, you're getting the captions. Are you passing that to some,
Oh
how are you?
no, it'll be so YouTube like renders and it takes about 24 hours to get them.
Okay,
So I just have like a really short snippet that, you and I are chatting and then I'll update it.
okay, got it. Right, right, right. But what are you using to turn the captions into the summary?
Oh,
Are you using something
yeah,
or
I'll
just you
download
yourself?
the SRT file from
Uh-huh.
YouTube and
Yeah.
then I'll just attach it to like a Claude prompt.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're using Claude. Cool,
Yeah.
cool. We'll have to talk about AI at some point, I think.
I'm actually really excited too. Actually, okay, we have to get circle back to test driven development.
No, at some point, yeah, go ahead.
But I have two guests coming up. I have Daniel Bergholtz coming back, who's like he
Okay.
has a
Yeah.
JavaScript channel and does Elixir dev. But
Yeah.
he just wrote a blog post about using windsurf and Claude.
I think I saw that go by.
So
Okay.
he's gonna come on and actually like do kind of a more like hands-on
Ooh,
episode with me, and
I
so
like
I'm
that.
excited about that. And then I have Chris Nelson from Launch Scout coming on,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they're like a dev consultancy firm, and
Yep. Yep.
he's gonna break down all of their AI solutions and workflows that they've been implementing.
Cool. Oh
So
man, that's
I'm
good.
excited about those conversations because like I think AI is really cool to make us more productive, but you're not going to prompt it and tell it to build you an app, you know?
Right.
So
Unless you're
I like to see the little hacks that people do just to like speed up development.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's where we're at right now. Unless you, I'm almost ashamed to say it, but the new term people are using, what, vibe coding? Are you familiar with this?
Oh, dude, I saw something that the Primogen talked about. He's like, now's the best time ever to learn how to code because everyone's going to be a vibe coder. Honestly, I don't know what that means, but maybe like explain it.
Yeah, I mean, I know very little about this. I just recently learned about it, but it's the idea that you completely like give in to the LLM, like you're not going to read any of the code it writes. So
Oh
you just kind
no.
of like ask it to do things and then sort of maybe run the tests and then ask it to fix itself or keep making suggestions and you keep testing the thing, whether it's through test it writes, I guess, or whether it's through like actually testing the app, if it's like, and people are developing like entire little games or stuff like that through vibe coding or whatever.
Oh
So
my gosh. You
anyway, I think
guys
that's interesting.
realize you can make shitty tests that pass. I want everyone to know
Yeah, it's
that.
absolutely true. Yeah.
Oh man.
You can make like tautological tests or whatever even, right? Like, but I think it's interesting. I think I saw someone say this really interesting thing is that if you experiment with vibe coding, it actually shows you kind of like the limitations, like where you're going to run into issues with LLMs or what they're useful for. And so it can actually help you in terms of honing your ability to do prompts or whatever. Um, yeah, I don't know.
We'll be inviting Herman back in a couple months because he's gonna transition to a vibe coder.
No, I don't. This is the, actually, I am testing a whole bunch of AI tools, but I find it's bittersweet because I love programming, like the art of creating. Like
Hmm.
this is why I actually wrote part of, not not why, but when I was writing PhoenixTest, the library, it was so nice to just have like pure creative moments of like, let me just kind of fix this, not tied to money. Like this was a really cool, for me, it was like, okay, I don't need to, this doesn't need to be something that makes me money, which is, as a consultant, I'm always like trying to think about like, is there some kind of, do I need, because I need to maintain my family. So like, do I need to, does it need to make money with this time that I'm investing? But this one was just like pure creation. I loved it. And so, but because of that, the AI stuff is a little bittersweet to me and I, because it's sort of like we're losing a little bit of that, at least every time I'm like, I don't know. I used Aider the other day, and I know it has different modes, but it just like made the changes and committed them, and I was like, I guess that's fine. Like I don't know, it feels weird to not even be able to kind of be part of this process that I've so used to, so used to being part of, I guess. Um, but we'll see, right? That
No,
maybe it's just a new level of abstraction we'll be coding in, right? Like it's just sort of more prompt based. I don't know.
it's interesting. I've used it a little bit to like clean up functions. Like I'll
Mm.
use it in really small areas. I'll be like, can you just like refactor this? Like I don't like something about it. And sometimes it'll give me a solution I really like, but other times it's like, no, what I wrote's better.
Yeah,
But I feel like you have to be able to read the changes and understand how to code. And
yeah.
like if you don't know how to code, you can't fully just trust what you're gonna get.
No, I agree. I actually think there's a lot of like doom for developers because of AI kind of conversations maybe or something. And I actually think if you're a developer who's been programming for a number of years, like AI tools just they can make you faster. I do think it's a little weird. It kind of changes I don't know if you have this like from programming mode to like code reviewer mode. And I much rather be programmer mode than code reviewer most of the time.
Yeah, I agree. I find myself hitting just the damn tab button instead of using my keyboard. So like cuz like I've been using cursor a little bit and I
Mm,
do like the autocomplete. Like if you start
sure,
manually refactoring, how it'll just jump line to line and kind of speed things up.
Sure. Yeah, that's nice.
But I feel like we're gonna have like the detriment of just forgetting how to type.
Maybe, maybe there's benefit there too, I guess. But at least it happens there. I've also had that issue where like I'm with autocomplete. I'm like trying to type something out, and it like sort of has a suggestion that's not what I was doing,
And
and
it
it
keeps
breaks my
annoying
brain.
you and popping up, and you're like,
Yes.
no, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, it keeps breaking my brain, right? Because it's like
Yeah,
I'm in like execution mode, and all of a sudden it puts me back in a different context. And I think it's way worse if you do like a large chunk of code, right? If it makes a
for
big
sure.
change, because now all I'm doing is code review, which again is fine, and I'm used to doing it because we work in teams and we do like if you do pull request flows or whatever, you're used to code reviewing, but that's not like I don't want to sit 8 hours a day just code reviewing,
Reading code is horrible. Like I have to like put slots of my day to go do PR reviews because you have to be in like the right brain set
Yep.
to read read code, especially when it's a feature you're not working on because you have to now understand the feature, understand
Yeah.
what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, reading code is just it's a different animal.
Yeah, it is a different animal. I guess I've been working in a team that does continuous integration for about a year now. Like it's my client, and that's been awesome. We don't do any code review. We're always
Mm.
pairing, and continuous integration. Continuous, yeah. Um, so I haven't had to deal with that. But even when I was doing pull requests, that's why I like small pull requests, like small chunks,
Yeah.
as continuous as you can, basically. And we would always be like quick to review each other's PRs so that it's not like a big, 1,000 line PR. Forget about it. That just takes like hours of your day, and it's complete
Since
minus.
you mentioned it, we'll come back to test driven development at some point.
Yeah, and I have a way to tie TDD with AI, just so you know. So
Oh, perfect.
we'll tie it at some point.
When you mentioned that you implement pair programming, you do that for almost all features then, or all additional code?
Yeah, so right now I'm working with a team. So just to kind of set the stage, typically when I work with clients, I'm like pair available, maybe. I need to find a better phrase for that. But basically, I think pair programming is phenomenal, but I know it's draining if you're not used to it. I know not everybody likes it. So what I typically tell my clients is like, I'm always ready to pair with you if you want it. And I'll try to encourage pairing and stuff like that. And for that reason, I actually only work with clients who have like about a 4 hour overlap with me. Like
Mm.
I'm in East Coast time, and that's because, well, partially it's pairing, but partially it's like I like to have quick interactions, quick feedback loop with stakeholders, with clients, all that stuff. So there's sort of more there. But anyway, so I typically do a fair amount of pairing, I would say, probably more than most people. With my clients. Now, this current client that I'm working with, we do pairing all the time. It's not mandatory. Sometimes you do something, but that's sort of the default mode of the team I'm working with. So yeah, I've been working with them for a little over a year, maybe a year. Um, and it's pairing all the time. Sometimes we do ensembles or mobbing or whatever you want to call it. And that's been an awesome experience, by the way. Like I was not a big believer in that one, I guess. I was like, I don't know how that's going to work,
Can you
but
explain that one to me?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So ensembling or mobbing, I think people are calling it ensembling now, but anyway, um, it's basically more developers. It's kind of like pair programming, but with more people, right? So that's why
Okay.
it's an ensemble.
Sounds like an interview.
But it's actually, yeah, you have to learn how to do it. Like we were experimenting with it, and I was like, I don't understand how you do this. Like, it feels like maybe we're just wasting time. I know that's what people say about pair programming, that you're kind of wasting time, and I don't think that's true, obviously. Uh, given obviously given what I do. But ensembling felt like that to me a little bit, and I think there's a certain amount of people that it fits. Like anytime I ensemble with 5 people, or like it feels like too many, so I typically split off. But it'll kind of like with pairing, you can have roles of like navigator and driver. Like with ensembling, you can kind of have similar things, where you have like a navigator and you have a driver and you have someone who's kind of like at bat for navigating, but is kind
And
of
then
paying
you have the
attention.
Viber.
You have that's right. You have the Viber on the side, is the LLMer. No, the interesting thing is that sometimes with ensembling, you can be focused on one thing. There's sort of the main track of work you're doing. But as you discover little issues or little, what we call side quests sometimes, because you have three people or four people or whatever, it's easy for some of them to split and go fix that thing and then come back and you're back into the main flow or context or whatever, without any harm, without stopping, right? So like it lends itself really nicely to that kind of workflow. And I also think sometimes three is a nice number, especially if you're working across time zones. So many times we'll start the day maybe pairing um, East Coast timers, and then maybe someone joins sort of all of a sudden we become more of like an ensemble. There's three of us, and then maybe like I don't know.
Do
At
you
some
just do
point
like Slack huddles? Is that what you do?
we use tuple for like pair programming.
Okay.
So that's better for screen sharing in my experience.
Okay.
Uh, so yeah, not Slack huddles, but yeah. So basically, yeah, I'm on a call all day basically, right? I'm doing remote pair programming, so we're doing that all day.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, and the other thing nice about ensembling is like if anybody needs a break, you're not slowing. Like people can just keep going. You're like, hey, I'm gonna take a quick break. You know, if there's people there doing the work, and everybody has the context. There's a lot less like context sharing that you need to do
Mm.
in some regards. Like everything else, I think there's trade-offs. It's not, I don't always do ensembling, and we have a rule that it's like, unless you feel like you're contributing or learning, feel free to just vote with your feet and like go do something else, like go join another pair or whatever. So it's sort of like a fluid thing where
Yeah,
you
it's
can join with
interesting.
three.
I
Yeah,
like
because
I kind of like the concept, and then I also think from like the management side of things, you don't feel like you're better off having two devs work on two different issues?
it's the same thing. It's I think a lot of the same arguments that you make for pairing, like how pairing doesn't slow you down, would kind of
Yeah.
apply. Like you could say, wouldn't it be better to have two pairs on two tracks? Well, wouldn't that be better to have four developers and four tracks? Like, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It
Well, I
depends.
will say like having open conversation around writing code, you definitely write better code.
Yeah.
Because you're
Y-
talking about it and be like, whoa, 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 why are you doing that? And then it's a discussion as you
Yeah.
continue working. I do like that. Like I see the benefits because whenever you're stuck, sometimes you just have to explain your problem to someone and you unstuck yourself.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of that. I do think there's costs, right? Like there's I'm not like a 1000% let's always do ensembling. There are people like that. And I think it's also part of me just still learning the skill because there is a skill here in how you have conversations about things or knowing when, because there's like decision by committee can also take forever, or you can thrash a lot on things, right? Like just like you can, multiple inputs can actually arrive at a better solution. Sometimes there's just like a little bit of thrashing. And so being able as a team to know how to communicate and say, you know what, like I disagree with that kind of decision, but like I don't care. Like it's not, I don't know if you've heard this, is the like I'm like I disagree, but I'm a one on a scale of 1 to 5. Like it's not a big deal to me. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe we should go the other business, right? And so that's that kind of thing. Because sometimes people are disagreeing, and you don't realize that one feels like a 1 out of 5, and the other one feels like a 5 out of 5. And so like
Mm.
that's helpful. Another helpful thing that someone told me about is like, and we practice sometimes, is if you're disagreeing on two options, or if you're unsure which one's the better option, if you're ensembling, you can split and test out both options quickly, like let's spike and then come back and figure out which one we want to kind of move forward. So it allows for those kinds of things because you're basically focusing high context, right? That's the thing. You have high context, everybody's on the same page. You don't need to like share information, stuff like that, because everybody's in the ensemble. Now,
Mm-hmm.
again, there's trade-offs, there's downsides, and
I
I
feel
don't.
like there's a nice like social aspect to remote work with it too.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Because we get so used to just being in our little closet, closed
yeah,
off to the world.
for sure.
It's probably a little healthier for us mentally.
I think so. I, yeah, I think so. It is draining. I think people need, if you've never paired and you start pairing, you learn that it's like, oh, I'm like, especially video. Video is different from being in person. Like pairing in person is a little bit different. So it takes a little bit getting used to, but I don't know. Yeah, I think there's good things about it, and I've been enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, I
So
like it. I like the concept of it for sure. I've never done it, but I
yeah,
like, because I mean, I've done like pair programming, but it's always like it's based off a specific problem that I've been running into too long, and just having an extra set of eyes and conversation around it is
yeah,
helpful, right?
right. Yeah, that's the most basic format. Yeah, you
Right.
just bring someone in to help you with a problem. Yeah, man, it's I would
You were
you
saying
kind
you
of need
need a
a
better
buy-in.
name for it. I think you should call yourself the Big Spoon.
Uh, I'm not. I don't know how I was gonna read on copy.
Oh
Or
man.
yeah, no. Big spoon. We'll test it out. We'll
I
see.
just
We'll see
always
how.
laugh. Always think about the meme where someone's reaching around someone and helping them type.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
man. Oh gosh, that's hilarious. No, that's a terrible image too. I don't know. Um, uh, yeah, I don't know what I would call it, but I'm always happy to pair. Is really what I
Yeah,
say,
yeah. No,
with my
I
clients.
like the concept. It sounds good. It sounds like a really good way for a junior to up their skills too.
That is also true. Yeah, yeah. Always important to have like conversations so they don't feel uh like they're bringing down the speed of the team or whatever. Like that is a common thing of like, oh, I'm like, I don't, as a when there's a junior that feel like they're slowing down everything. But
Hmm.
it's kind of turning that around and saying, no, we're investing in like speeding
Yeah.
you up. It's like actually much better. And I do think sometimes juniors in particular, they benefit from solo time. So at least some juniors I've worked with, they want the like solo time to go explore a little bit more without feeling like there's a
Yeah.
hard boundary of like, no, we got to keep kind of this track going. So don't go explore too
You
much, right?
also do need, as a junior, you have to struggle and do things wrong
Yes. And
just
it's
to
a
know to
really good
not
way to
do it
learn.
that way. Like
Yes,
the most,
exactly.
like every time I've learned something really beneficial, it's because I did something incredibly wrong.
That's what really sticks in your brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's absolutely true, right? It's very different to do stuff because people, if you're pairing all the time and they tell you that's a better way to do it, like, you know,
Yeah.
um,
Then you're not
uh,
learning that skill on your own.
yeah, exactly. But I will say one really helpful skill I think juniors can learn from senior developers. That's so long as the senior developers also comfortable with this, but is the ability to ask questions.
Mm.
Because like I think I don't know, at least when I remember back when I was a junior developer, it was like you always assume people know everything, but it's really helpful when people who are more advanced model the like, oh, I don't know, and there's no problem, there's no like shame in not knowing something, right? Or like how much you Google stuff, right? Or whatever.
Right.
Now you LLM it, right? Um,
Well, to go to sorry,
yeah,
to go
yeah.
off that too is an engineer's background or software developer, whatever you want to call yourself. We're so vastly different from everyone that we work with. Like what makes me a
Mm,
senior developer and what makes you a senior developer are very different things. Like
mm.
sometimes I think people are really good at like syntax and
Oh yeah,
language paradigm. Sometimes people are just better at like architecting the problem and knowing how to get to the solution. And they might be a poor like coder or whatever you want to
right.
call it, but they
Sure.
have the ability to use their brain differently. So
Yeah.
like I think it's fascinating because so I work with, three other Elixir devs and we're all like quote unquote senior developers,
Mhm.
but our backgrounds and where we come from and what we
Yeah.
know is so vastly different. It's like it's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And being willing to learn what you're good at and bad at, and being able to learn what other people are really skilled at, and like that's such a valuable thing. It goes back to what you were saying before. It's like I'm so happy I'm like the dumbest person in the room. Like being able to one not feel bad about that because like some people do, and actually think it's like it's the best thing you can do, right? Because then you can learn and not be afraid of like asking
Yeah.
when you need to ask,
Well,
or like or
I think
leaning on those
everyone
things.
struggles with like that imposter syndrome though, even like especially
Mhm.
if you're new to a team because you don't want to
Yeah,
let the team down, right? And
yeah. You're like I
uh
don't, you still have this. Yeah. You don't want
and
them to
like
think that there's an
learning and getting familiar with new code bases, I think is one of the most stressful things ever, right? But once you're like comfortable in a code base and you kind of know the gist of the product,
sure.
you're in a lot better place.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy the discovery aspect a little bit too.
Well,
Like,
no, I enjoy the discovery, but I'm just saying there's like a level of anxiety and
that's
pressure to
true.
learn it faster than you're learning it.
Yes, that's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's always like I gotta hit the ground running so fast, and like
Yeah.
don't wanna look like, oh, it's taking him 2 weeks to onboard, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, oh, this ticket, roughly should just be like an hour or two, but it took me 4. Why is it taking me so long? Am I an idiot?
Oh gosh, yeah. Do you do story pointing? Is that what,
Yeah, we
or
do
like
story
estimating?
pointing. I'm like on the fence. Like I get the concept of it, but I also think it's really dumb because you don't know what you're going to run into when you're doing your planning poker. Like
Yeah,
everything
sure.
from like the macro view is a lot simpler than when you actually do it. Unless it's
Yeah,
like already something you've integrated and it's like copy and paste kind of thing.
yeah. Oh, man, I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, we did it. The team was doing it earlier. I don't know, maybe like a half a year ago or something. We're doing story pointing, but a lot of us are kind of against it. So
Oh, we have a
we sort of.
question. What does story point mean? It's like
Oh, interesting. I didn't know
this
you
is
could
a
get
good.
questions. I'm in the future. I mean, I
Oh
know this
yeah,
is
yeah,
like,
we can get
well,
questions. We have a couple, but they didn't really like go exactly with what we're talking about, so I was just gonna
sure.
circle back to them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So story pointing. Are you taking this question, or am
I
I
mean,
going
we
to
both can.
take?
It is a irrelevant value
Yeah,
based off basically momentum and your speed. Like everyone's point systems can be different to them.
yeah,
But
yeah.
what everyone ends up doing, which is the failure of story pointing, is they put time to them.
Right. They equate it to time, right?
They
It's like one story
exactly.
point is a 4 hour block. It's like, no, don't do that.
Right. So
Yeah.
like, and I do get that because it's hard to understand what points even mean. So like on collects, we'll roughly say like a 5 pointer is like a day long ticket.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am not a big fan of story points, but I've used them in the past, and I think the most successful way that I've seen them used in the teams that I've been part of is, so to come to the question, story points are a idea is a relative value because we're terrible as humans as estimating like concrete time chunks, right? Which is why the failure of story points would be to equate it to a time chunk, because that's kind of the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's meant to be a relative value. Um, and the way I've seen it work, really, like the best way I've seen it work, which still had issues, I think, but is the idea is that you like do a simple system, because sometimes they're super complex, but you can do like 1, 2, 4, 8, right? Suppose those are your values. And where I've seen it successful is like anything that's an 8, it just means there's like a lot of unknowns, or like the complexity is so high that that means we should be breaking this, whatever story we're trying to point,
Into more tickets.
into
Yeah.
smaller things. Like you should
Yeah.
only be working on things that are pointed as 1, 2, or 4, which means you have basically discover the unknowns, or have enough of a lead on the unknowns, so that it's not like where you're saying a surprise that you're like, oh, this was a 2 pointer, and all of a sudden we dive in here and we find like a rat's nest that's gonna take forever, right? And the best way to the idea of story points, I think, is that your velocity, which means like how many points you ship in
Velocity.
a,
That's what I
yeah.
was trying to think of, and I said momentum. But yeah.
Yeah, the your velocity, your team's velocity is basically like how many points you shipped last week is this week's velocity, because your best estimate as to what you will ship this week is what you shipped last week. That's kind of how I see it. As like, if you're gonna use it, kind of use it within those parameters, or at least that's where I've seen it
But no
be
one
more,
uses it
more
that way.
successful. I know that the inevitable point to time is like so frustrating, right? It's like, let's
Yeah.
not do that.
But
So
like
yeah,
then I also get that. Like especially from like a product manager and like people that they just kind of want to be able to wrap around like, okay, how long is this new feature going to take? Like I get
yeah,
that, but it's like it's so hard. Everyone that works in software knows you just always run into surprise issues. Like everything takes
yeah.
longer than you originally
Than
planned.
you guessed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's another downside of story points, is that probably management wants to use it to estimate how long things will take.
And how productive you are and all those
Yeah, yeah,
things.
which I get the desire to kind of estimate those things, but I don't think they're a great measure for that. Again, for me, it's like if you're going to use them, is sort of to understand how much should we putting, like, what kind of work should we be putting on this lot for this iteration, sprint,
Yeah.
week, whatever you want to call it, right? And it's like, if we finished 10 points last iteration, let's only put 10 points in this iteration. Let's not pretend we're going to do 50 and then be, surprised at the end of the iteration that we didn't complete everything we kind of wanted to do. So anyway, that's kind of how I see it. But if management's going to be using it for estimating other things, it's like, I think you're going off the rails there.
I agree. Yeah. So I agree with you. I think it's really hard to estimate time with software development.
It's so hard. It really is. It's
And
just
that
incredible.
actually is probably one of the hardest parts about like being a consultancy, right? Because you take new work on and
Mhm.
you have to like everyone wants like deliverable dates and it's so difficult to hit.
Yeah, this is why, yeah, there's so many initial conversations I have with clients, but that, yeah, I don't do like time-based or fixed bid
Yeah.
projects, right? I'm always doing
I
like
used to
more like,
do fixed bid projects.
yeah, that's
But
rough.
it'll get you sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not good. I'm not great at that.
No.
I don't have a lot of experience in fixed bid stuff. I do like time and materials basically. It's like
Yeah.
I
I mean,
I
my
build
most
weekly.
successful projects were time and materials because
Yeah,
then you're not worried about overshooting or
yeah,
losing money or just overestimating a project and charging more than you should have, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard. I could see it, obviously from the client's perspective, it's like, how can you not tell me how long this is going to take? Like, I need to budget how much I'm going to pay you for this thing. And so I get it completely. It
I had
requires like,
such a I had a client where I mean we completely dropped the ball, but we underbid so much and this project
yeah,
had so many issues arise and
yeah,
it lost us so much money. Well, through
that's
our
great. Yeah,
time, but
right.
and that's the danger of fixed
Fixed
bids.
bid.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, it's tremendous amount of risk you take on, right, with fixed bids. And the client takes on risk without, when it's time and materials, they take more of the risk, I think. But there's ways to minimize that, right? I always do like, let's do a trial. Like, let's see how far we can go. Like, if you're worried about this, right? Like,
Yeah.
and there's also the communication, because there's I feel bad for clients who, like you said at the beginning, who don't know, like a non-technical founder who goes and spends $50,000 and they have nothing to show for it, because like it was sort of throw over the wall, throw a bunch of specs, and some team somewhere was supposed to be delivering
Yeah.
something, and like at the end of the month or whatever, they come back and they're like, oh, we don't have anything, right? That's not how you work, right? You gotta,
Right.
like, that's why I like the 4 hour overlap. I'm like, constantly, clients have full visibility into what's happening and they know every time.
You
So
definitely
anyway,
need to be able to trust
yeah,
engineers you're working with, right? Because
yeah, for
it's
sure.
very easy for us to basically fuck off, right? And
Oh
you
gosh,
don't
yeah,
really know. Like if you're not a trustworthy person,
yeah.
you got
It's
to
that.
trust.
It's
You need
yeah,
trust.
yeah, for sure. Uh, yeah. Anyway, want to tie back to TDD?
Yeah, I was just gonna. All
Okay,
right.
okay,
So you're a big test-driven development fan, and
yeah,
I think, I mean, I we can't assume this. So you want to just explain what it is
yeah,
first?
sure. So TDD comes from extreme programming, unless I'm mistaken. Maybe I am. And the idea is that in extreme programming, there was sort of this idea of like, okay, we write tests first, right? If you write your test first, that means you sort of are writing what you want the behavior of your code to be, and then when you execute that test, it'll have a failure, and then you can write code to satisfy that test, right? That's test first. And then from an extreme programming, the idea is like, what if we take that to the limit? And so we always do that. Like, well, not just testing, but we test first, and we test first all the time. And that's test-driven development, right? So test-driven development, if you ever look at graphs online or something, it also has this little like circle where it's like, you write a test, it fails, that's like the red state. You make it pass, it's green. And now they have a passing test, you have confidence that the behavior of your system is what you expect it to be, because you have tests that when you run them, it executes that and it confirms that, and now you can refactor. So it's also called like red green refactor, is a pretty
Hmm.
common phrase with TDD. So that's TDD. Uh, and then there's other, yeah, maybe I'll stop there. There's like BDD, which is behavior driven development, which is, another thing that I practice. And I know you asked me originally also whether I practice it all the time or not, and I can answer that, or we can go a different direction.
Um, yeah, answer that, and then we'll start talking about like some of the benefits, at least from my perspective of test-driven development. And I'm not claiming that I follow these, but I want to be a better person,
A better person.
a better programmer.
Yeah. That's funny. I hope you. I don't feel like. I hope you don't feel like a bad person for
No,
not
no,
practicing
no.
theory. But I do think there could be that connotation. Like I do think sometimes there's that, and I don't really want people to feel that they're not good people because they
You're
don't
not. You're a
practice it.
horrible person if you don't use test-driven
Uh,
development.
um, yeah. Well, I do think it'll. Anyway, let me answer your question. I basically practice it all the time. So that doesn't mean I can't like spike something without TDD,
Hmm.
but which I do occasionally. But I basically have been doing TDD for so long that even when I'm not TDDing, like when I'm spiking something, I need a workflow that quickly iterates, and I need to see failures to tell me kind of like, okay, what, like one of the cool things about TDD is that you call your own shot. So you call your own shot in how is the test going to fail? Because that also confirms some of your understanding of what's happening and what will be the next step. So even if I'm not TDDing and I'm spiking on something, I use Vim and Tmux. So I have like a Vim little pad or something.
I don't
And
know how you guys do it. I
oh, once you do it, you can't. I've tried to switch to other things, but you can't. Like the
Yeah.
way modal editing is so beautiful. Anyway, but that's yet another whole topic. Um, but even when I'm spiking, I will typically be evaluating things quickly and making sure that like, oh, the failure, okay, this is failing where I think it's going to fail, so I need to add this little next step. Um, so it allows me to do some really like incremental. I'm diving into other things, but anyway, I use it almost all the time. Even when I'm spiking on something that maybe I don't want to like fully flesh out the test, I still do it because my observation or my opinion is that even if you don't do TDD and you write the code, and maybe suppose you're spiking something, and I do a lot of web stuff, so you might check it on the browser, right? Like, is this thing working the way I expect it to? You're checking on the browser. So what you're doing is you're still testing, but you're doing it in a way slower feedback cycle where
Hmm.
you have to go grab your mouse, launch your Phoenix server, click refresh, right? You're doing the same thing. It's just that you're doing it a lot more slowly
You're just
now.
manually checking your outcomes, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like we always test. Everybody's testing their apps. It's just how are you testing it? Are you testing it manually? And do can you iterate quickly on it? All this stuff. So anyway, we can dive more into it, but
Yeah.
that's
So
basically why.
like my perspective of it is it makes us think through what we're trying to solve, right? Because
Yeah.
we all like as a programmer or like if you're building a product or a feature, you're excited, right? You want to dive right in, start writing it. But
Yeah.
sometimes if you start aimlessly creating a feature, you're not sure what your goal is, right?
Yeah.
And like I think like I run into this like the less you plan things out, the more back and forth you have, the harder like PR review you have because you have
Yeah.
sloppy code and it's apparent, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But if you take the time, and this isn't even like maybe you don't even write a test, right? But you take the time and write out what your goal is for like how are you going to accomplish your task you're about to do? And
Yeah.
just doing that, you're going to write better code. And then so like the way I think about test driven development is you're planning that but with a test. So you know what you're passing into something and you know what
Yep.
you want the outcome to be.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there's no you can't fake that.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's spot on. I actually I like to use I think it might be one of the 7 habits of highly effective people or something like that. But anyway, it's called begin with the end in mind, right?
Yeah,
And that's
I
what you're
like
talking about.
that.
Like
Yep.
you have a goal, and like you said, you can write out your goal actually with LLMs. You sometimes like are trying to think about how do I correctly prompt this. It's helpful to think of the goal as well. But anyway, um, you have a goal, but like you said, at the end you have an executable. Like this thing will confirm whether or not I am satisfying my goal.
Hmm.
And I actually find that with TDD or BDD, one of the things is you write just enough code to get the test to pass. And therefore, you're not running any other code than what you need for your
Yeah.
system to work, right? And so you're not wasting time in over-engineered solutions necessarily.
Yeah, and that is so easy to do. How often have you written something and then gone back to it and be like, why am I doing this extra
Yeah,
step? And you find out you
exactly.
just aren't, you're not even using something you wrote, or it has
Yeah,
nothing to do with the output of your actual goal, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. It's so easy to do, quite frankly, if you don't have something to tell you, oh yeah, I'm like I've finished the thing that I'm meant to do.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I even it's quite frequent where I discover that I wrote the implementation in a different way than I had in my head, because by going step by step, you realize like, oh, maybe there's this different path that I can take that it's just simpler or whatever, you know. And again, once you finish, if you don't like that implementation, now you have a set of executable tests that confirm the behavior of your system, and you can now
Hmm.
refactor things, right?
Yes.
And there's a caveat there though. I think sometimes it takes a little bit of practice to write tests that test the behavior and not the implementation of your code. Um, so the idea is that you're testing behavior. So anyway, that's just a
Explain
caveat there.
that. Let's dive into that one a little more.
Yeah. Depending on how well you know to like your test tools, I guess, you can test too much of the implementation of your code, um, because the way you're testing is not really in a black box, right? It's not like you don't know the implementation, and actually, I think this kind of happens sometimes when you test after the fact, where you already have the implementation, and you can tie your tests too much to the implementation. So let me give you a concrete example. I can give you a concrete example of something I talk about in my live view course, my testing live view course. Testing live, or when you test live views, um, it might seem contrived, but I've seen this in practice. You can, for example, assert that the HTML you have rendered has, I don't know, like it's hard to do hand wavy, but in live view test, the tooling itself, you render the HTML and then you basically assert against that giant string,
Like
right?
you want
That's
to just assert that a specific string exists. Or
or like that there's something in that string. So when
okay,
so
gotcha.
in live view test, just to say, for example, you have a view that you've mounted or whatever, and then you target an element and you call render click, for example, and so that's going to perform like a click event, and that gives you an HTML result. So like a blob of HTML that's just a string. And one way to write assertions is to assert that there's a match, that's a substring of that HTML is in there. So for example, you have a page and you're going to assert that your title is, Elixir Mentor. So what I've seen sometimes is that in that HTML, they write an assertion where the HTML rendered contains an H1 with Elixir Mentor, right? But they're actually hard coding the H1 tag in there, the HTML, right? You're sort of over specifying how your implementation works. What you really want to do is say, I want to assert that the title of the page is Elixir Mentor. Now in HTML, titles are usually H1, so maybe this is not the best of examples, but the idea is that if you can use, for example, the hash element selector or helper in live test, you can pass a CSS selector and a string. And
Hmm.
so you can say, I'm gonna say that the ID of title should have the title Elixir Mentor in it, right? So now you're using an HTML ID, or you could use a CSS selector like a data role, or some people use data test ID, stuff like that, where you're decoupling the exact implementation from your test. So again, your behavior is, I like this page should have a title of Elixir Mentor. It shouldn't be like the title is an H1 with this thing, because then if you add a class to that H1, all of a sudden your test breaks, right? So
Hmm.
that's the example of like you've tied your test too much to your implementation. So you can no longer refactor without having to change your test. Now, every time you change that title, you put a new class or a new CSS or whatever, all of a sudden breaking your test. So your test is really coupled with your implementation. And again, kind of contrived example, you can think about this even more in terms of like when you click a button or something and you're targeting that button specifically again by HTML or something, you run into these issues. And this is a web UI example, but there are many. I can try to think of another example if you want of like backend stuff, but it's the same kind of thing where
Right.
you want to test the behavior, not the exact implementation of your yeah, not your exact implementation. So
Yeah,
I
no,
don't know if
that's
that kind of
interesting.
makes sense. It's a little
No,
abstract, but
it makes sense. It's because if you ever tightly couple something too much when you're refactoring something, if you have to refactor something and then you're not changing the outcome, but you have to refactor your tests, you're getting in a hairy situation.
right, because you're then yeah, and you're
Yeah.
no longer in that nice like green cycle. And also,
Yeah.
if you're having to change your test in order to change uh your implementation, are you actually refactoring, or are you now
Yeah.
changing the implementation, right? Like,
Right. Are
or
you
are you
changing
changing the
code?
behavior? Sorry, right.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So
no, that makes sense. And like, oh, when you have tests in place, it makes refactoring a dream. You don't have to worry about things breaking. You can just
yeah,
trust your tests.
and honestly, that is, I mean, it's one of the huge benefits of TDD is that theoretically you have all your code tested, right, and you can refactor with confidence. And I would almost say refactoring the definition. I think people misuse the word refactoring when they mean like restructuring your code generally. But
Fair.
refactoring, the definition is change in code without changing the
Right.
behavior.
Right.
So you need something to confirm that you haven't changed the behavior, and that's what your tests do, right? So for
Yeah.
me, testing and refactoring go hand in hand. Like you,
Well, even if you move code around and break it into multiple functions and everything, I would still call that a refactor, even if it's just a restructuring.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right. That is a refactoring, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the idea is that you have. What I'm saying is you if a refactoring is a change in code that does not break the behavior of your application, then how do you know you're not breaking behavior, right? One way
Right.
to do that is if I guess if you go through the UI and you make sure that all the flows that you expect are still the same, but right, like again, that's sort of you're doing the testing in a different way, but um,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I like I need to just do it. I need to just pull the band-aid off and write my tests before my code. Because like I write test coverage for everything,
uh-huh.
but I always do it post. And I do agree with you. I think it's harder to do it post because you forget all the different spots that you should probably test, or
Yeah,
it's easier to miss it.
man, it's yeah, it's easy to miss it. I don't know. I think there's different things there. I can't tell you exactly because it's been a while since I've written a test after the I mean,
You
I do
know,
that for regression testing, I guess. No, not even.
regression. Well, tests are so good to avoid regression bugs and things like
Yeah.
that as well. We do have a good question from Jose. He said, Herman, what do you think about that policies of like 90% code coverage with tests? Do you agree? Will you increase that percentage or decrease it to 50 to 75%? All right, first of all, the higher the coverage, always the better, right? So, like my opinion here is if you're at 50%, you should never allow your code base to drop below that and you should only increase it through time. But I'll let you
I
speak on it.
yeah, I honestly have zero policies on percent of code coverage. I don't. I never look at that. The reason why is I think those metrics, just like everything else, like if you have 90% coverage, let me state this. There's two. What am I trying to say here? If you don't have 90%, if you have 10% coverage, you know that you need more tests.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know that one.
Yep.
But just because you have 100% coverage doesn't mean or like 90% coverage doesn't mean your tests are covering things well or correctly. Right. So that's one way to think about it. It's like the negation of the thing is a good indicator. So if you have
Hmm.
no test coverage or 10% test coverage, it's a good indicator that you're missing tests. But the positive of the thing, the positive of the statement, so if you have 90% coverage, doesn't guarantee me that your test coverage is great
Right.
because you can test things that are almost tautological. Like I, so when I say like you in theory, if you TDD everything, you in theory have 100% coverage, but that's not always true. And I don't necessarily test things that are completely obvious, right? I don't know, like I don't know. I don't necessarily always write like a ecto change set test if it's a very simple
Right.
cast or
Well,
something,
it's
right?
very easy to write a test that doesn't actually test everything. I think with
Yeah,
so you can write a crappy test that passes and makes you feel good because your code coverage is high.
exactly. So it
Yeah.
becomes a false positive, right?
Yeah.
Your code coverage indication is sort of it's just it's fooling you into
I do
trusting
think
something
it's
that
a
you should.
good metric to track, but you have to also make sure your test quality is good.
Right. And so yeah, exactly. So to me, it's exactly. It's like if you don't have any test coverage or you have very low test coverage, it
Yeah.
is a sign, right? It's a helpful indicator. But if you compare two code bases and both have 90% coverage, or one has 92 of those numbers. I hope that answers the question. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, you might have cut out a little bit in that last like 15 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just saying, if you have very low code coverage, then you know that you need more code coverage. Like you know that
Yeah.
there's something
Yeah,
there.
for sure.
But if you give me two code bases and one has 90% coverage and the other one has 92% coverage, I can't just from those numbers tell you that the 92%
Yeah,
coverage is better than the
right.
90%.
Well, you'd have to go and look at tests and actually see how well they're written, right?
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah,
But
and to a certain
I
degree.
do think it's a good metric for your own projects, right? Because you know the test quality going in. And I don't like so like collects, for instance, will hit like markers. Like we'll always try to increase test coverage.
Hmm,
Like everything going in from like this point forward has to be tested.
got
But
it. I
we'll
see what you're
never
saying.
let our code base coverage drop below like hard lines.
I see. That is a help. I have done that before with clients where, and it's been a little while, where if you go in and they have very little code coverage, that can be a really helpful thing so that you sort of establish a baseline so that, like you're saying, no new
Exactly.
code should be introduced without test coverage, therefore, like
Yeah.
decreasing the ratio.
Yeah.
I think that is a helpful tool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a good thing to keep an eye on, but don't let a fancy big number make you feel good about your test coverage.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
Because,
and honestly, in the end, for me, it's about trust in your code base, right? Like the thing I love about tests is how I can make changes and have trust that if the tests are green, I haven't broken things. I haven't
yeah,
introduced regressions. I haven't changed things
exactly.
that I wasn't supposed to change with effects that are happening elsewhere, right? So that's to me, that's the biggest sign. And if you don't have any code coverage metrics, you might not know.
Yeah.
But if again, if you have them, you still might not know. So again, it's sort of like I developed that over time with a code base of like, do I trust these tests because I know in the past that anytime I make changes and I run them, the past everything's good, and therefore
Yeah.
I'm good to go.
And I will say about like the first half of my software career, I worked for a lot of fast paced startups that thought tests were a waste of time, which at the time I agreed with because you're just trusting people that are smarter than you and
Sure.
whatever. I don't agree with that anymore because we've all experienced regression bugs where you fixed a bug 5 or 6 times and then it keeps reappearing because you don't have test coverage and you accidentally keep reintroducing it, fixing other bugs or adding features. And it's a quality of life thing to have good tests written.
Yeah. It um I think people think it slows them down. I do think when you're first learning to do TDD, even if you've done tests first, so for you, Jacob, if you're trying to do this, it will slow you down at first because you're learning a new technique, right?
Mm,
Even if you know how to write tests, you're still changing the way you code. So it's gonna take a little bit of adjustment and a little bit of time. But I actually think for me personally, I don't think it slows me down to write tests at all even when I'm writing them, because it's like you said, it's a thought process. I'm thinking about the behavior, what I want in the end, and then I have this executable thing that. So I didn't lose any speed in creating the test in my mind most of the times, and then it improved. It makes me way faster when I'm implementing, when I'm refactoring, and then for the rest of the life of the project,
Yeah.
we can move a lot faster because of that confidence. We can change code without having to triple check it all the time because we're unsure if we're modifying something that would break. Like that is
It's
huge.
it's kind of like making sure you have a good foundation for the building, the
Yeah.
skyscraper you're about to build, right?
Yeah,
You can
that's
you
right.
can
That's a
actually
good one.
trust the foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to keep checking the foundation every time you're about to add a beam, right? It's a good analogy. It's
Yeah.
like, are we about to break something? And that's how it is in systems where you're working on something. You're like, I don't know if we're going to break something. The amount of stress and triple checking you have to go through to like, okay, we're make sure we're not breaking something. Like that's you're removing all of that with
Hmm.
good test coverage. So yeah, yeah, you can tell I'm a big fan. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
it.
Well, so now like I want to talk about Phoenix Test because that's more front end, right? You're doing live view and static views and you're
Yeah,
testing the implementation of UI essentially, right?
yeah. So yeah, it's UI, yeah, for sure. The idea comes from so I've written a lot of live view tests, and every time I'm in a live view test project, I eventually start wrapping these sort of concrete steps into more pipelinable flows. Um, right? Because in live view test, to click on a button, you need basically three steps, like a three-step pipeline. You grab a view and then you grab an element and then you render a click on it. So that's the three things. And then maybe you want to then, you just wanted to click on that and then you want to submit something else. So you kind of you find yourself like with these really verbose, hard to read tests. And so I started wrapping those up. And then on the other side, if you want to test a non-live view Phoenix app from the outside in, which is what BDD is and what I typically practice, like you write first sort of the user behavior, what they would see, like navigate to this page and click on this button
Hmm.
and perform this action, and you should see this like flash message, and you should have created this user kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, there's no way to do that with for static Phoenix. Like I say static, it's like dynamically rendered, but not live view, right? Like non-live view or dead views.
Hmm.
There's no way to do that unless you use something like Wallaby. And Wallaby's been great. Like I used it heavily in the past, but Wallaby uses Chrome driver, so it spins up a whole Chrome instance, is running the browser, so it's really slow by default, and you run into a lot of issues because you
And
use Chrome
remind
driver.
me, Wallaby is like you basically can create user interaction, correct?
Yeah, it's if you've worked like Selenium in the past, like it's that. It's like it spins up it's user interactions. So you're doing the same kind of thing where you're testing, like I'm going to visit a page, I'm going to click on
Okay,
this link,
gotcha.
I'm going to
Yeah.
do these things. Not to be confused with Wallaby JS, which is a different library, but they both call Wallaby.
Okay.
This is the Wallaby Elixir library, and but it uses Chrome driver. So again, it's spinning up a whole Chrome instance, and you have to, for each test run, I guess, basically. Um, I think maybe it's a pool of Chrome drivers at this point. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so it's slow by default. It's great. I love Wallaby's syntax. Like it reads really cleanly, nicely. It's very expressive in what you're trying to do. But it's really slow by default because you're doing the Chrome driver things, and that introduces intermittent failure sometimes because you're dealing with Chrome driver and you're having to do all this stuff. So
Hmm.
um, because there was no good solution for non-live view or dead views testing, and because live view testing was so verbose, if I wanted to do any kind of like flow testing, I sort of found myself through two different apps kind of recreating the same layer on top of the tools we have, right? So like on top of live view test and on top of basically what is, I guess, contest like Phoenix controller testing, stuff like that. And so I basically combine all that into a library, and that's PhoenixTest. So whether you're in a live view or a dead view, it's like the same way you write the test the same way, and it's abstracted from you, and it's more of like a user-facing type of thing. So it reads a lot like Wallaby would actually, or like Capybara, which is the inspiration for both of these, which is a Ruby library that does the same thing. Um, and it's fast because we're not dealing with Chrome driver. We're just using the like in LiveView side, we're using what LiveView test uses, which is basically like a proxy process to act as the browser that communicates with a LiveView process. And in the static side, we're just making requests with Phoenix Contest, parsing that HTML, making it so it's easier to query that HTML and stuff like that. Um, So it's been working pretty well. I gotta say, I like it. People seem to enjoy it. So people
I
seem to
like
like
that.
it.
And
Yeah,
I feel like from like front end tests are always written off. Like it's very obvious if your front end doesn't work. Like that's actually the best place to test from because that's what your users are experiencing.
that's it. Yeah, yeah.
And
Honestly,
everything underneath the hood has to work for the front end to work, right?
yeah, yeah. I honestly, that's another thing that I've gotten so used to doing. I always start going back to the start with the beginning or begin with the end in mind. I always start with the test at that level because
Yeah.
not always, right? Sometimes the feature you're working on is actually nested in there, like you're doing something else, like nested in your app, and it's not user facing. But if you're creating a new feature that the user is going to use, you're applying TDD, but in layers. And so now we're going to go into BDD. I'm going to take a quick second to explain. So you basically write this outside test, this Phoenix test in this case, that will fail because you don't have something implemented.
Yeah.
So you implement it, but then it fails because you don't have something in the inside of your app, if you will, like the back
Interesting.
end
So you work
implemented
from the outside in.
every time.
I work from the
100%.
inside out.
Yes, that's what other people do, but I can't do it anymore. Every time I do that, I'm like super confused. It's
Because
so
like
funny.
I start at my schema level
Yeah, no
and
way.
then I'll go to my context level and then like my graph layer or whatever, my controller, whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's so I have to just reverse my thinking.
You gotta see, there's a graph. If you look at um uh TDD Phoenix, I think there's a graph that I replicated from a book that I read a long time ago. But it's basically that you can think of it, if you think of TDD as a circle of red green refactor, you can think of
Yeah.
BDD as two circles, concentric circles. So you're starting in the
Okay.
outside circle. When your outside test fails because of an inside reason, so like there's outside reasons why it would fail. In live view, maybe you're in the live view world and you're just iterating with PhoenixTest. But suppose at some point you're going to pull data out of your like Phoenix context or something. That's when I step inside. So if your test is failing because you don't have a context function defined, I then go and drop one level and write a context level function that
Okay.
is going to execute that. And
Now,
that
do you
one,
write a test for that though before you write the function?
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So you
okay.
step into the inside circle and
Okay.
now you're doing TDD where it's red, green, you refactor. Once you finish that, you step back to the outside circle. And maybe you've made it one step further in your like flow, or maybe the test passes and then you're done. But if you've made it one step further in the flow, then you run the outside test, see where it fails, and then you repeat the cycle. And so at the end, you have a fully tested thing. Your outside test is passing, which means your feature is done, or maybe you need to add something else or whatever. But it gives you the two layers, and it also gives you the ability to refactor at different levels, right? So like if I need to refactor something that doesn't change from the perspective of the user, but maybe is going to change my context behavior a little bit, like the behavior that care about is the user behavior at that point. And so that one needs to stay green, and maybe the other one I refactor and change the test or whatever. But I still have that outside layer of this thing is behaving like I expect. So that's BDD. That's behavior driven development.
Yeah, you inspire me. I need to start doing this because it makes sense to me. It's just like I feel like it's a laziness of not wanting to learn a new skill, but like it just makes so much sense to me to do.
Yeah, and it's not. I would say it's not lazy. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to change when you've been programming for a long time. It's hard to change the way you approach problems.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I actually think learning TDD is sometimes easier for people who are new to programming
That
because you
makes
can start
sense.
them from scratch of like this is a way to approach it, try it, and learn it, and do it that way.
Yeah, that makes
Uh,
a lot of sense.
so I don't know. I say, but I say try it. Like, and
No,
I
yeah,
say
I'm
this.
going to. I want to.
You got to give it though, like couple of weeks
Okay.
every day. Do it. Just do it from the outside in. Whatever you're doing, start on the outside, write the test and all stuff,
Yeah.
and then reevaluate. Right? Like maybe you don't like it. I think you'll at least learn a new way of working. It'll make you approach problems differently. I don't know. I think it's a very interesting
I think
approach.
long run you probably become a more efficient developer.
Yeah, I can't tell you because I don't have the
It forces you to
counterfactual.
plan your outcome, and
Yeah,
anyone that plans before they do anything is going to do something better, you know?
maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I certainly hope so and think so, but
Yeah.
I don't have a counterfactual of me if I hadn't done TDD, right? Like that would be the most
So, do you I know we've been going on for a while, so we can like slowly start to wrap things up. But do you have resources that you suggest for people to go to pull in test driven development or behavioral driven development?
I wish I had really good resources. I unfortunately don't, and maybe that's a sign that I should update. Like the book was meant to be part of that, but because it's a little out of date and people have to use like Wallaby and stuff, that to me is the biggest issue. It's not the version of Phoenix or anything like that. It's that they have to use Wallaby, and that requires sort of like this extra layer of stuff you have to bring in, and you know, um, but that is supposed to be like a step by step tutorial of like let's do TDD together kind of thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't have another great resource other than in let me say in Elixir or Phoenix format, right? Like if you want to learn more about just regular test-driven development, there are good old books. One sec. Um, so for TDD, anything Kent Beck related is always good. I don't
Oh
know if you can
yeah.
see this. This test-driven development by example from Kent Beck. That's a good one. Um, Honestly, I learned BDD both through learning from other people and from it was called the RSpec book because RSpec is a testing framework for Ruby.
Okay.
But they introduced BDD there to me, and I learned so much from that. It's not great because it's not, again, an Elixir resource that I can point to readily, but it would be that, or I think there's probably a lot of stuff online now, right? Like you can just, I haven't looked at it because I haven't needed to, but look up Kent Beck, TDD, BDD,
Okay, awesome. And
or
then
look at, yeah.
you mentioned you have a live view course.
I have a testing live view course. It's still out there.
Where can people find that?
That's on testingliveview.com.
Okay.
Um, it's still good. I need to update it for 1.0, but it's updated to 0.20, and really nothing meaningful has changed in how we test live views from there. But if people ask, it doesn't use PhoenixTest because people ask me sometimes, does this use PhoenixTest? It doesn't. It's about live view
It
testing.
sounds like you gotta make a new course and use PhoenixTest.
Yes, and I try to do too many things.
Yeah, that I think that's everyone's problem. See,
Yeah.
I always try to do too many things and then I get burned out and then I'm like, can I even program?
Yeah, I know. No, I do that too. I go through periods of like I'm doing a million things and I'm awesome and I love it, and then I'm like I can't do anything for months because it's just sort
Yeah,
of like
it's hard. In fact, the only thing that I have not got burned out on without like I have to be careful with like side projects or just anything because it creeps up on you. But like this podcast because it's fun because I get to just talk to people doing cool stuff and it keeps me
yeah.
up to date. And I don't really have to prep too much. I just have to get ready to ask dumb questions.
Oh man, I know. I don't know if you remember. I tried to start a podcast not long ago called Elixir Friends.
Yeah, no, I saw that and I was excited about it. And I know you kind of mentioned it's like on hold or in pause. Is it
Yeah,
because you just have too much stuff going
that's
on?
exactly right. I'm like I
Yeah.
can't like yeah, just the organizational aspect of it is just too much. It's like figuring out who to bring in and who to talk to, and like yeah, I just and
I
it
just randomly DM people.
it's so good.
And
I mean, and it's so much fun. I love that too. Like that's what and relaxed
yeah,
conversations. That was also the idea of my podcast. Is like it's about like life in Elixir, just like from
yeah.
people who are in the Elixir community, but just life in general, kind of like what you might just chat about in a hallway track. That was sort of the idea. And I had a few people, but man, it's just hard. I just had to think about like who am I gonna get ahead of time. I like you when you scheduled this one, it was like a month ahead, and I was like, props to you. I was like scrambling the week of. I was like, I need to find someone. I just
So I don't put pressure on myself. I try to do them every week, but I don't put, if
mhm.
I don't fill a week, I just don't
That's
announce that I
smart.
have a podcast, you know? Like, why put the pressure on it? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Yeah, it's a smart idea
I
because
try to
otherwise
release a podcast every week. Sometimes there's like 2 or 3 weeks between, and I just don't get people.
yeah, yeah. That's a smart idea. I like
Yeah,
that because the stress is what kills it, right? Yeah, it makes it
yeah.
really stressful. Yeah. Hmm.
See, the I'm just not good at overly planning. I just dive in and do it. And like so like you booked this, right? I think about it yesterday. That's when I first think about it. I
Yeah.
look at some of the things that you've been doing. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've seen this stuff. This was really cool."
Yeah,
I make an announcement on social media that we're going live tomorrow,
man,
and
yeah.
that's just how I roll.
I gotta tell you, from the outside, it looks so organized because you did the social media announcement yesterday. I only saw it last night, and I was like, "Oh gosh, like Jacob's so prepared. Like this is on social media. He's got a pic, anyway,
Yeah.
but it feels very prepared. I was always like,
Oh,
last
yeah,
minute.
I'm so prepared. Everything's planned to the minute in my life. And
Nice, nice,
no,
yeah.
at the end of the day, everything's just fire from the hip, I feel like, but it makes life
But this is
fun.
great. And honestly, it's like about I try, I don't know. I try to do everything with iteration, right? Like just keep doing it, and if you want to
Yeah,
change things, you can change it the next time. Like having more, you always have more at bats, right?
exactly.
Just keep it going. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
No,
like if
this is
you went back to my first episode, it's funny. Like I went way out of my way and I had like a cool Twitch theme made that like frames my videos. And I'm just like, this is too much. It's distracting. And I was like, I'm just gonna have two side by side videos and talk.
yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I was yeah. Speaking of the podcast thing, I wasn't planning on doing video, and I started doing it with video, but if I do continue it at some point, it will be no video because, like you said, it's more work to edit and more work. It just requires a
You
whole
got to
lot of
just do
yeah.
video because then you can put it on YouTube. Spotify supports video podcasts, and
I don't know. It's like so much more work.
it's not just do live stream. And then if you say something stupid, it's already out there. You can't undo it.
That's fair. But then I'll have to ask you. I'll have to ask you because even this stuff, like I have never done live streaming, so
Yeah,
I don't know. I know there's tools. I know of tools, but I forget them already, and like I don't know
yeah.
which ones I need to
I
use.
mean,
And
I know them enough just to have it working. Like I could, like I should just make a video of what I do to go live,
yeah,
and
there you go.
it's just like
Yes, do that.
it's a shitstorm. I just trial and error until it works. Like when we first signed, like before we went live, I couldn't even get audio to my headset. So
Yeah, yeah, dude, you should do that. I feel like those are great. It's like just behind the scenes, people appreciate that always.
yeah, like
Yeah.
the day in the life of Jacob. Like shit, I have a podcast tomorrow. I have to do a social media post.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how you do it. I like it because it has my image and everything. I'm like,
Yeah, I'll usually just go steal one from a social media platform, and
makes
if they
sense.
don't have a good one, I have to ask. I have to reach out and be like, "Do you have a headshot or something?" Because a lot of people, like a lot of developers, they'll love just having like a cartoon or like some weird
Right.
image, and you're like, "I need a real picture of you, dude."
You need, yeah, you need to find a conference where they spoke, where they had to
Yeah,
send a picture in
exactly.
or whatever. Yeah, no, makes sense, makes sense. Oh man. Well, no, I appreciate you doing this, not just for like having me, but as a podcast. I think it's awesome that we have more of these, and I know the work it takes, and I know you're saying you don't have to prepare a whole lot, but I still know it takes a lot of work. Like, there's a reason why not everybody does them, so I appreciate it.
Yeah,
That's good.
no, it's fun. Like yeah, obviously there's work involved, but it takes a lot off the plate just doing it live.
Yeah,
Like that's my
interesting.
hack for everything. Just do it
We're doing it
live.
live. Doing it live. I like that. Okay.
Just like rip the band-aid off, just go. And
Yeah.
what's fun about live too is we get questions and people can interact with us as we go.
That is cool. I have really liked that. I didn't know
Yeah, like I
that
can
that was
even
going to be.
turn on, like I don't know if you have this pulled up to see it, but on YouTube I can like pull up my comments and they just like go over my face. So
Interesting. I
let's
don't
see.
have, yeah, I'm not even, that's
Jose
interesting.
goes, what do you think is needed to speed up the diffusion of Elixir ecosystem? More reference in different languages, for instance. Like, oh, there's lack of Spanish speakers. So actually, cool thing,
I
YouTube
speak
just
Spanish.
so you just make content in Spanish.
Oh, God.
But so YouTube actually just emailed me,
Mm.
and I don't have a huge account, but I probably have a big account in the Elixir space, right? But they're going to be dubbing my videos automatically for like most like 50 some languages. So
Whoa.
I you should be able to watch my videos if it's not already out. It's coming very soon in any language.
I wonder what voices they'll use. I guess maybe
I
even ours,
know.
right? Is
It'll be
Gemini
interesting.
doing this or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's kind of that's cool.
That is interesting. I wonder if my voice will sound like my voice in Spanish because I do
Cuz I
speak
feel like
Spanish, but
programming tutorials would be hard to dub.
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how it works, but
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. But Jose, right? Jose asked the question.
Yeah, Jose.
Yeah. Yeah. Jose, if you're looking for Elixir content that doesn't exist, you should make it.
There
That's
you
the rule,
go.
you know? Just
That's why I made my YouTube channel.
yeah, just jump in there. Like there's nothing to I know people feel afraid to do it, but it's like just I um one of the rules I have on creating content is I try to do my normal stuff 90% and 10% share back, right? So
Mhm.
whatever you're learning, just share it. And
Yeah. Like, oh,
it
I
works so
did
well.
realize someone did ask. They're like, you should teach what you've been learning. And like, I do plan on doing that because they're like distributed nodes and scaling and what you
Yeah.
do at the high level. Like, that's new to me. And at some point, I am going to be putting some material together because I think it's good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please share it. It's
Yeah.
always good. I wish people did more of that. I can't tell you how many times it's like it's nice if you are, oh man, I'm struggling with this thing, and you go and you find a blog post that's like exactly what you were looking for, and it's someone who
Yeah.
wrote it, and it's
Well,
probably
like,
like 10 people read it, but you're like, oh, thank God this
I
is
love
here, you
like
know?
Peter Ulrich's approach, like the
Yeah,
micro blog, where you
yeah,
just
yeah,
teach one very specific niche thing,
yeah.
and that's all you do. But like when that one person has that specific problem, you're their savior because they found it.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And yeah, don't be afraid. Like I think sometimes people think of blog posts and they think it needs to be long. Like write short ones. I can't.
Yeah,
How many times people are like, "Oh, look, I was looking up this thing and I found your little video," right? And it's like
yeah,
the shortest thing. And I gotta say, sometimes about the imposter syndrome you said earlier, sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I didn't know this, and
yeah.
I'm gonna share it, and like I feel like stupid for not having known it. But that's exactly the kind of video that everybody's like, "Oh, I didn't know this. This is awesome." And it's like, "Oh, I guess I wasn't the only one who didn't
Yeah.
know it." It's like just my fear that I'm the only one who doesn't know it, right? So
Well,
that kind of
one of the ones that I just saw from you was like the mix the dot info.
yeah. I just learned that recently the other day.
So like I remember learning that, but I forgot about it. And so like I love being reminded like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I
Yeah.
dig through my freaking like mix file all the time or the
Yeah.
mix lock file all the time. It's so
I
freaking
know.
annoying."
I know exactly. I do the same. Or like I'm
uh,
like, oh, with this thing, I go to GitHub, it doesn't have the version. And I'm like,
I
I gotta
do
go
the
to text
same
packages. It's like,
thing with debugging. I don't use the built-in debug functions, and I'll
yeah,
always just do IO puts and inspect everywhere instead of like piping it in
yeah,
and like actually using the built-in debugging. Like,
yeah. It's
yeah,
and I gotta say another thing for creating content is that uh many times I'm like, I know I learned how to do that, but I've forgotten. But I know
yeah.
I wrote something about it. So I just go and search it and I find it. I'm like, there you go.
Dude,
It's like,
I'll rewatch my videos for starting like new projects and stuff because I'm just like, I forgot. Like, I
yeah.
forget the flags and stuff. And sometimes, I don't know, if I don't feel like looking at documentation, I'll just, talk myself through it.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Thank you, past Jacob.
But I will say, like, it's hard for me to watch some of my original videos.
That's
One,
yeah.
you're just like new at it and you might not do things that way anymore, but you just have to put that out of your brain. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. That's fine. Yeah, you just
Yeah.
gotta. I think we all expect. Um, there's this thing called like, especially with design, I think, but this is it's true of all these things. It's sort of there's a gap between your taste, quality, and the ability of you to produce. Like, if you ever think of like, maybe think of drawing. Like,
Mm,
you know what a good drawing looks like, and I'm a terrible draw. Like, I'm not great at drawing. If I draw something, it's like this is terrible, right?
yeah.
And so it's the same with all of these things. Like you maybe want to create content, you want to create a video, and you're thinking of like some awesome content creator. And you're like, oh my gosh, like my stuff looks terrible. But the problem is you're comparing yourself to someone who's have like 200 at bats, right? So
Exactly.
it's like the taste. You have the taste to know that your videos are not great or whatever it is, but you don't have the skill yet to reach that. But it takes time, So you just
Yeah.
gotta like be okay with it and keep iterating. So
Yep, I agree. Awesome.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Herman. This was a lot of fun. We'll have to do it
yeah. Thank
again.
you. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. All right, everyone
All
else,
right.
thanks for tuning in. Have a good weekend.
Yeah. All right. I'll see y'all.
Testing.